Good evening, everybody, once again, and thank you very much for taking time out and joining us. And I understand that all of us have been through a very difficult period, and we've seen a lot of pain and suffering. And I'm glad, and I really hope that all of you are okay, and your loved ones are also fine. And I wish us all, the patience and the perseverance to come through this period and gather together and be there for each other. So thank you again for making it, and please do take care and stay safe. So without much further discussion, let me just start. We at ICRIER welcome you to the ICANN71 pre-meeting briefing. This is yet again a virtual meeting. This is a policy forum session, and this will take place from 14th to 17th January and will be completely virtual. And a lot of you here are regular participants at the ICANN meeting, and there may be a few who are new and would like to understand what's been happening or how to participate as well. So for those of you who are new, please do not hesitate to ask a question or to interrupt a conversation, or if something is going into too much of a detailed ICANN lingo, please stop us and ask us to explain it in a layman's term as well. So with that, once again, a warm welcome. May I now request Mr. Samiran Gupta, the head of ICANN at India, to share a few highlights from what we can expect at ICANN71 and any other important details that he'd like to share. Samiran, over to you.
Thank you, Gangesh. I hope you can hear me better now.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you.
Okay. All right, great. Well, firstly, thanks to Gangesh and your team at ICRIER for putting this, pre-meeting together. These have been very difficult times the last few months, and I just hope everybody who's joined today are keeping safe and healthy. I'd like to approach ICANN71 from a slightly different perspective, because everybody who's joined would possibly know that this is the policy meeting, and you may have already, some of you would have already seen the GNSO document that has come out. But I think one of the key issues about internet governance and ICANN, and ICANN's process of policy making is to ensure that this process remains relevant and connected to whatever else is happening in the world. And there are some examples of sessions which you will find on the agenda, which kind of bear out what I'm going to be talking about very quickly. So there are these sessions that that ICANN and the community have been organizing over the last couple of meetings, where we not only talk about what goes on within ICANN, but how ICANN continues or needs to continue to remain relevant. So two examples I'd like to tell you about very briefly is the at-large policy session about end-user participation in ICANN PDPs and their role in the ICANN ecosystem, and another session, the plenary session on the impact of regulatory developments on ICANN policy developments. Both these sessions are sort of are related to this whole question. So whatever goes on in ICANN, how relevant it remains to the outside community and to stakeholders, and how do we make sure that the multi-stakeholder model at ICANN continues to evolve. Apart from this, of course, there are many sessions that will take place over the next 4 days, which is 14th to 17th of June. I've marked at least 33 of those which seem interesting, but I'm sure our other colleagues on this call will speak about some of those. I'm looking forward to hear from both Satish and Isha and also Amrita, particularly on the upcoming sessions and the highlights of those. But again, in closing, let me say that internet governance does not happen in isolation. It needs to be connected to what's happening on the ground, and therefore look out for these slightly different off topics in a sense, where somewhat definitely connected to what goes on at ICANN, but looking at it from different perspectives so that we capture all kinds of perspectives into this mix. So with that, let me hand it back to Gangesh. Back to you, Gangesh, and wishing everybody a very successful meeting. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Samiran. And thanks for highlighting some of those very interesting sessions. In fact, the team here at ICRIER were also looking forward to those sessions in particular, and which is why during this pre-meeting briefing, we picked up some of those plenary topics to actually deliberate, and one of which you highlighted on the regulatory developments as well. And definitely the discussion on multi-stakeholder model with ICANN and even within the larger internet governance ecosystem is also a very important topic for most stakeholders here in India. With that, thank you once again, Samiran, and may I now request the CEO, Mr. Anil Kumar Jain from NIXI, to share his updates and his perspectives on the meeting, and also in particular his stakeholder group, the ccNSO. Sir, if you may please.
Thank you, Gangesh, for inviting me and sharing my thoughts with the Indian community. So ICANN is again back with us, and ICANN always give a lot of updates and a lot of information. As Samiran has said that this time it is more policy session and what is happening around ICANN, ccNSO in various working groups. I think the community will get briefed about it. And I will also be part of one of the briefing session, which is on 16th at 4 o'clock as per the Indian time. This is regarding the CCPDP working group 3 and CCPDP working group 4. These are basically about the retirement policies. First, CCPDP3 will speak about that what working group is proposing to ccNSO, and for working group 4 is working on IDN, CCPDP, and we will be talking where I am the vice chair of CCPDP working group 4, where we will be talking about the principle and criteria of selection of a IDN CCTLD. What should be the parameters under which ccNSO should accept the application, what should be the uniqueness, and this time we proposed to have a poll from the audience on each and every recommendations which we are proposing as a working group. So anyway, friends, this is a very interesting part which we have, but overall, if I see, as Samiran has said, that these are very difficult times. The second wave has just finished, or it is at the ebb of India, and all of us are really struggling to come out of this particular wave, and the government is preparing for the third wave also to come. So difficult time. Industry is really suffering on this. So there are two things which I want to say about the session. One is there is a session by ccNSO on the scope of enlarging the scope of ccNSO. It means that there may be discussions where we will be, or the ICANN will be talking about who should be the member, who should be the additional member. And I propose that all of us must attend this particular session and voice over and give our voice of the India to the whole world. That today we have CCTLDs, we have GTLDs, and we have 22 IDN CCTLDs. So basically, all 22 CCTLDs should be given, IDN CCTLDs should be given a chance to become the ccNSO membership, because it is very important. And I want to refer here to a article in Economics Time which has come today from the CEO of Cloudflare. and which this gentleman, this company is based in US. I think all of you must be aware what they are looking at, and that is what I briefed this to Secretary Sir. Also, I gave to the JS in charge of internet governance also today. Basically, what now the whole world is looking at. Whole world is looking at we India, right, to take the leadership of the policy making and to run the entire internet governance in the world. And that is the voice we are getting from all of us. I think we have to now prepare ourselves to take the leadership and build up the ecosystem in such a way that people start working on those directions. Another observation of the CEO of the Cloudflare is that India is now, in whatever, whether it is true or not, the perception is that we are leaning toward the internet governance model which is proposed by China. I think this is a requirement which we have to work together as an Indian community, that to remove this perception from the mind of the people. Let us work out and voice over strategy, which we called multi-stakeholding. The policy which India is taking and promoting in the whole world. We should be doing that particular part very carefully. Another thing which we have done in NIXI, I just want to tell you that we set around 7-8 of us are set, and we decided which are the topics or which are the session which we must attend compulsory, and we prepare for attending that session, in the sense that we prepare some question answer, we prepare some thing to interact in that, so that the presence of Indians should be felt. So I'll just tell you, like I am attending the policy session as a vice chair. Shubham is attending on 14th as a tech day. Then Shantanu, my GM finance, is attending at large leadership session. Then Rajiv is attending DNS Sec and security workshop. Abhishek Gautam is also attending the DNS Sec and security section. Abhishek Mishra is also attending. One Rishabh is attending the tech day, and one Akash is attending the next generation presentation day. My request, which I discussed with ICRIER also some time back, I think it is required, if we have to take the leadership on internet governance in these forums. I think it is very, very important that we should take the speakership slots wherever it is possible. May not be possible in ICANN71, but we should try in ICANN72 and forward. We should also take up, the speaker slots in IGF, which is going to come in the month of November. I just want to tell that this time we are going to have a India International Governance Forum also. We are starting for the first time, and we are holding this IIGF in the month of September. My request to all the audience here is that we must also select few policy sessions depending on the convenience of the time and availability and the subject of your choice. Prepare it and feel that you are representing India. Prepare it properly. In case some help is required, NIXI is available, ICRIER is available. We can also help in preparing those particular sessions, and let us put a tricolor flag in every session, so that people around the world, they should at least get a perception that India is back. India is available in big voice and large quantity, loud and clear, to the whole international community. With these words, I wish all the best for all those 4 days, starting from 14th of June to 17th of June. And let us put our mark as Indian. Thank you very much, and thank you, ICRIER, for inviting me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir, for that, for those inputs, and very inspiring words as well, and sharing a more detailed strategy of how you and your team entirely at NIXI are engaged across the board with sessions at ICANN. And I think we'll do our best to support both NIXI and every other stakeholder here in terms of how we can engage deeper and more meaningfully with the ICANN meetings and other internet governance processes and institutions as well. I just wanted to particularly appreciate you highlighting that we're considering hosting the India Internet Governance Forum in September, and we look forward to it. And also the importance of the PDP. If there are no questions or if there are any particular queries, if anybody would like to ask, we can quickly have a question, because I think Sir had mentioned that he wanted to step off early. So if there are any quick questions we could have before the Q&A itself. I believe there are none so far. So with that, thank you once again, sir.
What I suggest, Gangesh,
yeah,
in case there is any questions in future, maybe in the chat box also, please note down and please forward to us so that I can answer those questions to that particular person directly through my email.
Definitely. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for joining in.
With that, thank you once again. And Mr. Santosh from the Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology will be sharing a brief update on the GAC perspectives for ICANN71. Santosh, sir, thank you for patiently waiting, and we'd love to hear from you.
So good afternoon, all. I hope that all are safe and okay by now due to this pandemic. So next week, ICANN71 is starting, and GAC, the Governmental Advisory Committee, would be discussing on 4 major areas. The first one is DNS abuse. So DNS abuse during this pandemic was very severe, as every speaker has mentioned. So the topics are DNS abuse, then subsequent round of new GTLD. Then the third topic is on the data protection, or we call it as RDS, OS data protection policy. And the fourth one is on the intergovernmental organization policy. So these are the 4 areas in which GAC will be discussing during the ICANN71 week. So on being as CEO NIXI has mentioned that this being a policy discussion, so we will be, the GAC will be hearing the briefing on the what are the status on various issues, like in the case of DNS abuse mitigation. As everybody are aware that due to the malicious activity on the internet, it threatens and affects domain name registrants and end user by leveraging vulnerability in all aspects of the internet and the DNS ecosystem. So the GAC will discuss about the past initiatives, I mean the previous discussion which happened in the earlier ICANN meetings. And also it will discuss upon the development and enhancement of the current mitigation measures and the safeguards, and also any potential future policy development. So these are basically on DNS abuse that that GAC will discuss. Now, coming to the subsequent round of new GTLD, the GAC will take this, will use the ICANN71 as an opportunity to review its materials and position, because as I presume that everybody are aware that the PDP released the final report for public comment, and it was closed during the current month, that was on 1st June 2021. So we will be discussing about what were the inputs, what were the different countries input, as well as the other stakeholder inputs. Yeah, so basically there will be more discussions on the inputs which we have received by GAC as well as the other stakeholders. Then coming to the RDS, OS and the data protection policy, the GAC focus for this week, I mean the next week, would be to discuss the timeline of the SSAD, which means the standardized system for standardized for access and disclosure. So basically, we will be discussing about how to implement it, and I presume that there will be a discussion with ALAC also in this. Then coming to IGO protection matters, the GAC is focusing on resolving the, there has been a long-standing issues created by the divergence of policy recommendation provided to the ICANN board by both the other community like GNSO, and we will be discussing on the both the GNSO input as well as the GAC advice regarding the protection of the IGOs. So these are the four major issues as well as the items which will be discussed during the next week, and I wish all of you to kindly attend, as CEO has mentioned, to the various ICANN sessions interested to you. So see you at ICANN71 virtually, and thanks again ICRIER for having this virtual pre-briefing. So over to you, Gangesh. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Santosh, for that update and sharing rather exhaustive details about what the GAC will be deliberating. It's actually heartening to hear, some sort of a conclusion coming towards the WHOIS and ARIST, the RDS2 directive. Some of these topics have been being discussed for years, and it's nice to see a sort of conclusion, and it's extremely important for government stakeholders and for the end users in terms of accessing WHOIS data for legitimate purposes. And this was a sort of a big concern for many stakeholders, and the finality of seeing it in an ICANN process is also very satisfying. And I was also just wondering that if there would be some sort of a tough discussion when it comes to aspects of DNS abuse, because like you noted, there have been a lot of discussion around it, but there have also been diverging perspectives on whether there's a legitimate increase of technically what can be defined as DNS abuse, and with the data supporting that. So because there are different types of data sources, there are also different narratives that are coming in terms of increase in DNS abuse. So thank you once again, Mr. Santosh, for sharing that update on what the GAC will discuss. And I would urge stakeholders to attend these sessions, because if we look at this meeting, unlike the previous two meetings, the sessions focusing purely on DNS abuse are mainly within the GAC. There was an ALAC session, which I believe was cancelled, but on that, I think I'll go on to the next speaker, who Mr. Satish Babu from the ALAC. There's a message from. Right. Yeah, there's a working definition on DNS abuse. Yes, Amrita, that's right. And let me invite Mr. Satish Babu from ALAC, who would share updates from the ALAC perspective. Satish, please go ahead.
Thanks, Gangesh. I hope you can hear me.
Loud and clear, Satish.
Right. So very quickly, ALAC is working on several policy related issues, as well as internal administration and other issues. I'll quickly run through the main policy points that we're looking at, and then run through the schedule very briefly. On the EPDP and GDPR, basically the ALAC has taken a position that the board should reject the current SSAD recommendations. And this whole debate about the legal natural persons, ALAC recommends that we add a field to differentiate between these two. ALAC would like to state that consumer protection is a very important priority for ALAC. And of course, ALAC will respond to the public comment on the report and further advise the board on these things. Another topic that has come up is reputational block list. So these are things that have been used for the last maybe 20 years for distinguish between spam and non-spam, or the gray list, white list, black list kind of. And now, from a DNS perspective, we are suddenly looking back to these, and the community is now trying to understand how this is going to work. So there is a session where we not ALAC, but the whole of ICANN is going to discuss reputation block lists. The ICANN multi-stakeholder model and continuous improvement to it. It is an ongoing process, and we are participating in it, and we have now a playbook, a consensus playbook, because we have seen that over a period of time, 15, 20 years, the whole process of consensus has undergone many changes. The high point was when we had the INR transition, when everybody worked harmoniously. But subsequently in the EPDP, we found that several constituencies are kind of digging their heels inside, making it very difficult to arrive at a consensus. And therefore, this particular issue of the ICANN model itself was being discussed from Kobe onwards. And the consensus playbook is a very interesting document. If you've not seen it, I'll strongly advise that you download it and take a look at it. It explains how we can achieve consensus even in the face of very different positions from different constituencies. The subpro, we are looking at the subpro again. In fact, APRALO has just kind of last week released our own position statement on the subsequent procedures. We are, of course, focusing on things like the UA, IDN, and the applicant support program, etc. But the ALAC perspective is that the PICs, that is the RVCs and PICs, which are commitments that are being offered by registries. Now, in the last couple of years, especially when the PIR sale was being discussed, there was a lot of interest on PIC, which are public interest commitments, later called as registry voluntary commitments, RVCs. So the ALAC believes that these should be enforced because there's a huge debate over the enforceability of these things. So ALAC wants this to be enforced by ICANN compliance. And if there's no intent to enforce, take it out of the contract itself. Then there is a comment on the application support program that it should have more resources. And also that the GAC members should have a notification tool if they wish to be they wish to be informed automatically of any geonames based applications. Then ALAC also said we do not support private auctions. And another couple of less important points that I will not get into. There's just the overall system is very complex. If you want to, we also see what happened in the Indian context. So the end user experience, ALAC felt should be paramount. As far as the virtual meetings, which is another agenda item, using these subsidies.
I'm not sure, Satish. I think there was a bit of audio loss in the last 2 sentences you mentioned. So if you could just come again on the last 5 to 10 seconds of what you were speaking.
Right. So I was talking about the transfer policy review. This is when you want to transfer an end registrant wants to transfer domains. The feeling was that the system is overly complex and not very friendly towards the end user, and that therefore the end user experience should be considered as a factor. For virtual meetings, which is another priority item for at large, given the fact that the at large people are largely volunteers and they do not work for either companies or in other jobs which are paid. There was ALAC felt happy with the bandwidth subsidies, which some people are availing of. We are also thankful for some of the new features, online tools, the translations, the Google Jamboards, breakout rooms, etc., which has been very useful for us. There is also this question on what is the future of ICANN meetings. Are we going to have hybrid sessions, or regional sessions? These have all been proposed in various combinations, so we hope to see some interesting debate on this. DNS abuse, still very important, one of the most important topics. And for us, we have said repeatedly that the DNS abuse mitigation policy must be put in place before we talk about new rounds of GTLDs. Currently, the other issues.
Sorry, Satish, we lost you again for the last 2 seconds. The last bit that you said. Satish, if you're speaking, we're unable to hear you.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, now we can, Satish.
Sorry for the audio.
It's all right. Thank you. Thank you.
Right. So I was talking about ransomware in DNS abuse. This is not a new issue, but it is coming up in the ICANN context as a new item. We are also aware that the US government is in fact considering military responses to ransomware attacks, which apparently are largely originating from Russia. So this is going to be having geopolitical overtones, but as a cybersecurity issue and a DNS abuse issue, this is going to become more important. At large, as far as DNS abuse is concerned, he is committed to education, end-user education, individual education, and working with accepted definitions, as was mentioned just a while back. Universal acceptance is the other important topic. It's also interesting to see that there is an EPDP on IDNs and UA, which is going to be interesting. And the at-large, of course, is seeking to participate in it. So these are the talking points that we have identified as far as policy is concerned. There are probably a couple of other things that are interesting for India. One is that there is a geographical indication session that URLO is running. It is a URLO session focusing on Europe, but then they came back yesterday and said they want someone from India. So first we thought we could, treat it in a general sense, but they were very specific, saying that this is about intellectual property. It's about the three-letter codes and the two-letter codes and the currency codes. So these were actually an issue with the geographical names. So we have, in fact, I have, with the help of some of other friends in ICANN, located an intellectual property lawyer who's been making presentations at WIPO. And she will be actually talking about the India. I mean, I don't know her in person, but we just had a brief email encounter where she'll be also talking about, she has actually worked on domain names, especially when it has geographic indications earlier, on behalf, not on behalf of India, but representing India's interests at the WIPO. But otherwise, looking at the sessions, we have on Monday, the opening session, and a session that looks at the end user participation in ICANN policy processes and the contributions that the at-large has done. So this is going to critically review our policy contributions, and hopefully we'll come out with measures on how to kind of enhance it. We are also, for a change, this time looking at CCTLDs and the whole governance model of CCTLDs and how it is going to impact end users. This is on Tuesday. On Tuesday, again, we have a session on GDPR as the technological approach to solving GDPR. And this has got specific relevance to a new patent that has been issued to VeriSign. This is an automated system to look at RDS from a GDPR perspective. So far we've been kind of having extensive discussions on how to solve the GDPR issue. Now this is a new take, that we have an automated technology-based system to look at this. So this may be interesting because it is perhaps the first of its kind to kind of adopt a technology-related basis. Then we have on Wednesday, 12:30 UTC, that is 6 p.m. India Standard IST, we have this session on protection of geographical names in Europe. So that is where this person that I talked about from India, she's going to be presenting along with the people mentioned in the program currently. So the specific issues are going to be the Alpha 3, that is the 3-character codes, the currency codes, etc. That is ISO 3166 and ISO 4217. This may be interesting to us. So there may be fallouts of this for us in future. And finally, on the last day, on Thursday, we basically have the wrap up from the ICANN, the at-large perspective, and we also have our social media competition and related things. Of course, we do have the final session on the post-pandemic future of ICANN public meetings. That's where this whole options like the hybrid and regional and combinations of these are going to come up. So I'll stop here. Back to you, Gangesh.
Thank you so much, Satish. It's always stunning to see the breadth and the range of issues that ALAC engages with. And it's almost like you can understand most of ICANN just by listening to the ALAC updates, because it touches upon almost every stakeholder group as well. And I'm guessing that shows the importance of representing the end user and how the end user just gets affected in terms of policy that happens at a very technical layer or the technical mandate that ICANN has. Thank you for also highlighting some of these very interesting sessions. And in fact, one of the things that I noticed is we're also discussing about the practice of multi-stakeholderism, and not just a theory or a concept in terms of structure. And just that multi-stakeholder model itself was not an easy thing to handle. And now you have a virtual version of the multi-stakeholder model that you have to deal with. So I just want to come back to you with a quick question on your personal opinion as to whether the hybrid or the regional type of meeting formats, and in these years that you've seen, what do you think that is the direction in which Indian stakeholders might benefit in the future models for meetings?
Thanks, Gangesh, for the question. I think it's a very important question. It is being debated, at least if not in public, at least in private. The problem is that the multi-stakeholder model assumes that all the stakeholders participate equally. Now, if all stakeholders are, for whatever reason, unable to participate at the equal levels, the model is going to be wonky. I mean, it's going to kind of have distortions. Now, what we see post-COVID is that despite a lot of effort looking at the Asia-Pacific region, for example, but it's not confined to the Asia-Pacific region, we are finding that many of the end user organizations and individuals are kind of getting fatigued and switching off. And we need to think of ways of rejuvenation of these people, because we need kind of the breadth of representation from end users. If not representation, at least participation. Now, that is actually languishing now because it may be a temporary phenomenon brought about by the COVID crisis. But from a multi-stakeholder model perspective, we have to take into account the fact that there is this fatigue. And looking forward, whatever you might say about travel grants and visas being blocks, they also had their good points that everybody were rounded up in a single time zone. So nobody was kind of disadvantaged. They could participate, without any other kind of issues like, being in the middle of your sleep or whatever. But right now we have a problem that no matter which meeting you take, somebody is asleep. So that is the flip side of it. So we are hoping that of course, there have been a lot of improvements in the online tools. That's of course a relief. But for us in India, English is the only language that we can use to communicate with ICANN. We don't have language translation issues. So for the Indian people, I think one way to look at it is to see whether India could be considered as a kind of regional hub of some kind, where whether we can have some kind of hybrid models where the Indian stakeholders can meet in one place. And I think this needs to be discussed, at least at our level. If there is a consensus, we can then try to push it alongside, to the other circles. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Satish, for that response. And I think there's a bit of activity in the chat room. And I also noticed that the Joint Secretary from the Ministry has also joined. So, sir, if there's anything that you'd like to intervene in or jump in, please feel free. We were just having a very interesting discussion from the ALAC updates, and we were just discussing the practice of multi-stakeholderism at the meeting. So, sir, if you have anything, please feel free to jump in.
No, thank you, Gangesh. I'm just in a listening mode today. I have not done my homework, so I'm just listening to you guys.
Glad to have you here. Thanks. Anyway, so I just want to bring to everyone's attention Brajesh's question on the engagement that ICANN has with other organizations like the ITU and other multilateral processes. So I think ICANN's government engagement is the department that focuses on that. And maybe towards the regulatory development session that we have towards the end of this meeting, I'd invite Samiran and anyone else to also share further updates on that. So we'll be coming to those details in just a bit, Rajeshji. So may I invite my colleague Isha to share a few updates from the ICANN GNSO policy updates. Thanks, Isha.
Thank you, Gangesh. And I think the good thing about going last in the SOAC updates is that there is very little for me to bring it to the table. But in terms of GNSO, there'll be two important ongoing discussions that will happen. And that is, one is about the expedited policy development process 2A that Satish also hinted on. And this was another separate work track that was formulated, as I'm sure a lot of people know, that to distinguish between legal and natural persons. And secondly, to look at the feasibility of having a uniform anonymized email for unique contacts. So then a phase 2A a group was formulated, and that group has done its fair bit of deliberation as to how can you do it. What are the best ways to probably have a separate legal versus natural persons. They've also gone in and discussed, what could be potential harms if inadvertently your personal information or private information is leaked. And one of the things that the group is also talked about is that would self-designation work? And by self-designation, I mean that if a business wants to opt as a legal person as opposed to natural person, then you have a caveat explaining to them that by doing so, your private information or personal information may not be redacted. So the interim policy report, as I'm being given to understand, is almost complete. And during the ICANN71, there'll be a high-level meeting where they'll be talking through these high-level findings and discussions that the phase 2A group has had. And the interim policy report should be out soon. So they were expected to have it out by May 2021. And for the community and stakeholders, this would be an important point for them to be queuing in and looking at where do they stand on this side of the debate, and whether it's still a part of over compliance, or is there merit in the kind of discussion that's going on. So that's a good opportunity for stakeholders to engage in this development process, especially at the stage of an interim policy report that is being released. The other thing, as Satish was also pointing, is the expedited policy development process for the IDNs. And this is also important, as CEO sir was saying, that you have 22 IDNs. And for the Indian community particularly, I think this would be of high interest. And since even in the GAC working group on IDNs, India has sort of taken the lead of the working group that has been formulated within the Government Advisory Committee. And this group would basically be talking about definition of all TLDs of managing basically variant labels in the root zone. And secondly, on the IDN implementation guidelines, which will have a direct impact on issues such as protecting community issues around local languages, consumer confusion, cyber spotting. I mean, those are the kind of issues that these IDN implementation guidelines have a direct impact on. And I think for that very reason, this will be very important for the Indian stakeholder community to engage in. And this is just going to be the beginning. So during the discussion of the session, which I think is on the 14th of June, they'll be talking about the mission, the scope of this policy development process, the charter, and those are the kind of discussions. And I think if you get in the room well in advance, you have a greater chance of being able to make a difference in the discussion at large. Apart from this, some of the other work that the GNSO was doing, there wouldn't be any dedicated sessions on some of those, since the GNSO sub-pro report was out, and as Santosh GAC representative from India was also mentioning, they've released a public comment. The ICANN org has released it for public comment because it's gone through all the consensus and full consensus recommendations have been approved by the GNSO Council. And the org will consider the public comments, and based on that, they'll decide their next course. In the meantime, the GNSO Council has also requested the org to convene an implementation review team and also an operational design phase for this PDP. And the other thing is, again, as the IGO curative rights protection mechanism, the update on that was that the board has to decide whether they approve the recommendations 1 to 4. The issue at hand or the area of divergence was recommendation 5 for curative rights protection mechanism. And there is a separate IGO work track that has been initiated. And there was an addendum that was added to the final report, which approved recommendations 1 to 4. So there'll be deliberation on that, and there will also be simultaneous discussions within the government advisory committee as to what's the status of that IGO work chair and how does it move forward. I've tried to cover whatever has been of importance to the Indian stakeholder, and these are the important discussions that would be happening and that have been flagged by the GNSO Council. Apart from that, another session that I found of particular interest was the one by the registry stakeholder group, where they will be discussing on how to get newer entrants for the next round of application process. And I think that could also be a great learning session, because they'd be brainstorming and discussing various strategies on how to engage newer applicants for the next round to really enhance the stakeholder community that you had an impact on. I think that was one of the learnings that you had even with the erstwhile application process that happened in 2012. So that's it for me. Happy to take any questions. If there are no questions, I cede the floor to Gangesh to take over for the thematic discussions. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Isha. And I think we noted some of those very interesting areas of discussion that the GNSO will be discussing, a lot of which overlaps with the other stakeholder groups as well. However, I'm very eager to see how the ID and EPDP pans out, because I'm sure it's a very important area for us back here in India. So with that, thanks again, Isha, and I'll now invite Amrita Choudhury to share her perspectives on this important plenary topic. So for those of you who've been regular with these pre-meeting briefings, usually we have a stakeholder update and we maybe have a PDP related update, but we don't usually pick one session and discuss it. But this is a topic that I think is very dear to all of us who have been engaging with ICANN processes and even the internet governance ecosystem. And anybody who is looking to engage will also find this very interesting. Amrita is a person who's been engaged with this ecosystem for a while and would like to share her perspective. And we can ask her a couple of questions on that. I'll be just sharing the presentation which she has shared with us.
Thank you.
Amrita, please go ahead and you can share your initial remarks.
Thank you so much. See, there is a session which we would be discussing, but before that, I thought, I would give you some background about why this session is and why it may be of importance, and some background information. So, first of all, sorry, let me thank ICRIER for arranging this discussion, and thank you everyone for being here. Most of you are ICANN insiders, I would say, so you may have knowledge about what it is, but I thought I would give you a recap just in case someone has missed it or there's someone who's new. So, the basic objective is to discuss the ICANN's multi-stakeholder model within Internet Governance Forum. The next slide, please. So when we look at ICANN, one way ICANN is unique is because it uses a bottom-up system of governance. For example, it is not the board which decides what topic will be discussed, but it comes up from communities, the various SOs and ACs. If there is some amount of traction or interest found, it is discussed, deliberated, then comes up for public comments, and it goes up in the hierarchy to actually be discussed as a proposal, and if it is passed, it becomes a proposal. So it's not a top-down process, rather it comes from different community members. And the decisions are made in consensus. Now, decisions may not always be, may always be liking of everyone. However, decisions are made based upon at least a rough consensus between communities that this is something which is workable, this is something which is not workable, it is not, my way or the highway kind of a situation. And there are different stakeholder communities, the advisory committees and supporting organizations. who are part of the working groups or the discussion processes, where different community members based upon their interests and expertise participate and then contribute to the discussion so that some kind of nuanced understanding can come. The next slide, please. So if we look at, when ICANN started, and one of the unique things of ICANN's multi-stakeholder model, and we always talk about multi-stakeholder model, but we forget the essence that it is the community and the different stakeholders who actually work on it, who actually are part of it to make it happen, is and the uniqueness of ICANN versus IGF or the other internet governance bodies is the policy decisions are taken, the policies are implemented, and the policies have a global impact. So if we look at the various multi-stakeholder models which are there, ICANN is one of the successful models. Of course, there are issues which needs to be addressed, but it is one of the successful models where decisions taken are implemented, unlike the IGF or any other place. The next slide. Now, so if you look at it, the world is changing from when ICANN was formed and to date, because the geopolitics is changing. There are different players which are coming. The governments are becoming more, I would say there are regulatory issues creeping up. There are various impacted people coming up. Internet and the services of internet is behaving in different ways. So just like ICANN is evolving to keep up with the times, the regulatory landscape is also changing, and that is making ICANN do a lot more things which perhaps was not doing. However, while there is a tug of trying to get ICANN into many issues like content moderation, etc., ICANN is pretty clear that it wants to stay in the technical realm and look into the mandate it has and not go out of that mandate. So and that is something which Mr. Jain asked, that what is ICANN doing in ITU and other things. It's primarily trying to keep, place its opinion, and Samiran can clarify me if anywhere I go wrong. It's basically to clarify and position what ICANN's position on those topics are, whether it is in its realm or not, and how, and to clarify issues to various governments or intergovernmental organizations or other entities who are involved. The next slide. So what happened is the community felt, because there was a change in the way things were happening globally in internet governance, there was felt a need to enhance the effectiveness of the multi-stakeholder model, as in it was working, but it needed some fine tuning. And for that, certain steps were taken, and that's what we would be discussing in brief. There is a paper to discuss it, and Gangesh may put it into the chat, but I'll just give you a brief to give you an update on it. The next slide. So in 2019, the board initiated a project to enhance the effectiveness of the ICANN's multi-stakeholder model. And then the board appointed an external consultant to seek community inputs. Now, community inputs were gathered, and it was categorized into 6 priority topics identified. I'll share it in the next slide. And after that, in June 2020, the board posted a paper for public comments and it was enhancing the effectiveness of ICANN's multi-stakeholder model and the next steps. Based upon the comments, the paper was finalized, and currently it is in the implementation phase. So this is what is happening in that there were certain issues or areas which were identified which needs working. Of course, there may be many, but main 6 issues. And the next slide. So what, even within these 6 topics, based upon priority, there were topics classified as most supported topics, and then there were other topics. For example, under the most supported topics, you had the prioritization of work and efficient use of resources. It was found that since it's a voluntary based organization where policies are discussed and people have burnouts, there is very less resources. Not everything can be done. So it is important to prioritize the work so that the system is more effective. precision in scoping of the work. For example, there may be many, many times it was found that many of the issues were not scoped properly. So it was observed that it needs to be, the scoping needs to be effective, sharp, so that you get the results which you are actually looking for. Similarly, and also to improve decision-making process and avoid volunteer burnout. Then the next one was consensus build representation and inclusivity, which actually Satish was alluding to. And it was found that, stakeholders have different points, they are at different levels, and there is a need to actually work on how the consensus building representation can happen and how to make the systems more inclusive and deliver on time. So these three topics actually presented the opportunities for building on existing work which has been done, and to kind of add effort for greater coordination. So these are not reinventing the wheels, it is existing things which are being done, just to tweak them a bit to make them more effective, and wherever there are gaps to actually plug those issues. And then there were other topics which were identified, such as the complexity of the tools to access information and data and content, the culture, trust, and the silos which it creates, and roles and responsibilities. However, what it was felt that while these issues are important, these have an overlapping reach with the other issues, and perhaps could be taken up in later activities, which may come up in the different future plans. The next slide. So what, as the next step was planned was, a work plan was defined, and for each of the three main topics, for example, what are the description of the work areas, what is being done, what is currently being done, and what are the areas which needs to be addressed, the gaps. And it was felt that, while the implementation is happening to, address these gaps, there should be an evaluation method which should be tied to ICANN strategic plan, and so that it can be looked at whether the outlined steps are actually helping to address these gaps or not. The next slide. And so this is a snapshot. You will find it even in the document, that while these three are the main issues which has been identified, there are various places where there are, I would say, overlap of issues. You could see it in leisure, but since there is paucity of time, I will not go into it. And so this is going to be discussed. The next slide, if you want. And this would be discussed on 15th of June at 6 p.m. this plenary session. It's from 6 p.m. to 7:30 p.m. India time. So in case you have the time and you have the, you could actually go into the session and hear what is being said and see what is of interest. So I'll stop here, Gangesh. If there are any questions, I'm happy to answer. And if you have any questions, please ask me.
Thank you so much, Amrita. I think, even though some of us may have been people who have engaged with ICANN for a while and understand, I don't think anybody will complain about a recap, because it's always hard to keep up with all these developments that are happening. So thank you very much for taking the time and giving us the detailed journey of how ICANN's multi-stakeholder model has evolved. So I just had please feel free to raise your hand and ask a question. But while we're waiting for any of the stakeholders to ask, I just wanted to ask Amrita that you've seen how the ICANN model has evolved over the years. But in your personal experience, what do you think was one of the most significant changes that underwent ICANN's multi-stakeholder model from your early days of engagement to the present day?
So I think the IANA transition was one of the turning points where actually the US Department of Commerce gave up its, I would say, control over a lot of the names and numbers and gave it to the community. And, the entire way in which the discussions and deliberations happened at that point of time on, how the PTI should be formed, what should be the other, different components which would help to manage the, the IANA functions, I think was the turning point. And it has been successful. Of course, we may not agree to certain issues, or as a country or certain entities, but it is working. It is working, and every issue, everything which works may need improvement, but it is a working example of how multi-stakeholder model actually works, a real multi-stakeholder, and not lip service that which many a times, many places it is used. So I think that's the turning point, which the globe also, the world over, people saw that yes, it is something which works.
True. In fact, that just made me recollect how there was a lot of people who doubted whether this would work, and it's a wonderful reminder that it is continuing to work. And like we can see, there is a process to continuously improve the model that we're using. So on that, the slide that's being shared on the screen, I just wanted to take your opinion on where do you think Indian stakeholders could focus their energies on in terms of these focus areas and particular action areas. Would you have any recommendations for the community or particular stakeholder groups as well?
So I would not look only at this slide. I would speak in general based upon my observation. See, we do have many Indian stakeholders who participate in the ICANN meetings on and off. I will use on and off as a word, because obviously they are volunteers, they have their own day jobs or interests, and they come in at times and then they go out. And there is a huge volunteer burnout in India. As Satish mentioned, that most of for the people who go into ICANN, this is not a paid job for most of them, at least the civil society or many of the others, because if you look at different parts, people are paid to participate. Here it is not the case. So there is a lot of volunteer which happens. They need, for example, if you're looking at prioritization of work or participating, I'm not looking at just this slide. For example, participating in the PDPs or something, it requires a lot of effort to be there on all the calls, follow up on the mail trails. For many people, that becomes overwhelming. So I guess if we could help our community members a bit in those things, it would help. And the time zones most of the time doesn't suit us. But nevertheless, because people have their day jobs, and the day they'll do this, and at nights they sit and do. Not always it is possible. So if some kind of supports can be created, because if you're looking at SO, SE in leadership engagements, or if you're looking at what are the various improving communication, of course ICANN can improve communication at various levels, making it more though their communication is pretty good, I would say it's not complicated, but not everyone can understand the context. The context should be explained to many of the people. For example, we say SOAC or anything, a new person may not know, but in this call, most of the people who are there understand it. So it's easy to understand. Or if we say ATN, ATRT or something, EPDP, we understand and not everyone understands. So if some background information is given, perhaps it's easier for people to understand. Similarly, if you want to get into scoping of work or all that, people have to understand the background. You have to spend some time. Inclusive representation, yes, you can represent, but you need to say something which is same. And just speaking in one meeting will not help. You have to be part of those conversations. You have to be part of an SO or AC. That is important. Today, one fine day, you go into an ICANN meeting and you voice your opinion. Yes, that matters. It is recorded, but it doesn't help. So those are my points. I may be wrong, but that's my perception of ICANN over these years.
No, I think that's a wonderful roundup of suggestions that you have, and some of which I think are actionable to most of us here today. And I think the point that you made about context really struck me, because a lot of us who are engaging will still try to find the Indian context and translate it, and it's something that's not easy to do and requires sort of concerted effort and dedicated people working on it. So I hope we are able to build a community that's able to support new stakeholders who want to engage. And I think as far as possible, we encourage stakeholders to reach out to us or to members on this call to learn more and to seek support in terms of engagement or in terms of understanding these topics. And the other point that really struck me was the consistency of engagement. You're absolutely right in that a lot of stakeholders, if we look at the history of ICANN engagement from the India perspective, there is lot of people who have engaged very deeply, but are not able to continuously or consistently engage. So thank you for highlighting these points, and thank you for this discussion. If there's any questions from the stakeholders on the call, I'd be happy to take them. Amrita, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, I just wanted to add something. You know, many a times in global forums, you need to be strategic when you say something. Not always would you say it is in India's interest. You need to say it is in the interest of the community of developing nations or emerging nations, because many countries definitely may have the same interest, or, you know, you make your audience vast. As in, yes, we do have a national interest, but we can always present it in a more strategic manner.
That's an excellent point. I'm sure that each of us here pride in national interest and take deep concern and interest in it. But I'm pretty certain that jingoism is not something that's welcomed in the global community, and conflicting perspectives might not be easy to handle. So thanks for that reminder as well. That's a useful point to keep in mind when we engage on global fora. So if there are no quick questions, I think we're slightly exceeding the time. I hope some of you can stay with us for a quick discussion on the final plenary topic discussion. I'd hand over to Isha to lead the discussion. Thank you again, Amrita, for this wonderful and detailed discussion on multi-stakeholderism.
Thank you, Gangesh, and really thank you, Amrita, for those great set of updates. I'm going to begin from where Samiran started. And something that struck with all of us, and that was the reason why we had these thematic discussions, is that internet governance cannot happen in isolation, and it does not happen in isolation. I mean, if there's something that we've learned from regulatory developments in recent past and proposed some of the pending regulatory developments that are being discussed and debated the world over, is that it will all have an impact on the way the internet functions, right? And that was one reason where we thought that since ICANN is having a discussion, it's a great way to kickstart some of these conversations back home. And to do that, to kickstart this discussion, may I now invite Gangesh to share or shed light on what are some of the recent regulations that have come in the past, and how do you think that has had an impact on policy development process, specifically on ICANN, yes, but also on other areas. I mean, how does that function? And what are some of the proposed developments that you think are something that merit a discourse or a conversation?
Right. Thank you so much, Isha. And I think this topic we touched upon at various points with various speakers on this call itself, some of these regulatory developments. While the session at ICANN is particularly looking at ICANN.org's requirement in terms of regulatory compliance and the kind of navigating that ecosystem, I think it's important for the community to also understand the scope of the internet governance ecosystem, and how what we say that a butterfly in Tokyo will cause a storm in California, sort of a thing. The impact that some small regulation from even from the smallest of countries can have on a global network like the internet is something we need to highlight. But if we look at the focus areas in the past few months or years, is that we're looking at a lot of development in terms of personal data protection regulations across the world. And in India as well, that has been one of an important areas of regulatory developments. And ICANN really, faced the brunt of it with the GDPR coming into force, and it's a significant struggle in terms of compliance. But I think the organization eventually did manage with all the regulatory compliance, but there are still details that continue to nag in terms of complying with certain specific data protection authorities. And secondly, there is a flow of regulatory developments that are happening, particularly with Europe, with the Digital Services Act and the Markets Act, and how they may impact the technical functions of ICANN, or the liability that comes from ICANN's performance of these technical functions as well. Similarly, if you look at, there's a Network and Information Security Directive, I think it's called, abbreviated as the NIS2. That's another area of regulation that's come up. And if for stakeholders who are interested, the ICANN Government Engagement Division also publishes regular reports on different regulations, both from the national perspective. So they have country reports wherever new developments have come up, and they track regulatory developments that may impact ICANN country-wise. And in addition to that, there is the UN-related processes, whether it's a Cybercrime Convention or whether it's a UNGA resolution, or if it's ITU-related as well, that these are also tracked. So in terms of purely the legal instruments and legal regulations that come up, this is tracked through this division and in this fashion. And this came about more recently after learning from the GDPR experience as well. The other thing that we often miss because of the focus on personal data protection is the understanding that sometimes regulation does not come as a statute or as a law. Sometimes it's a protocol, or if it's a technological development. So there is also this idea of technology as law or technology as regulation. So there are technological developments that come up that might affect the way the internet functions, or in a way that ICANN organization as an ICANN org, or even the ICANN community has to respond to. And some of it is handled by the Office of the Chief Technology Officer at OCTO at ICANN, where, for example, the technical developments at the ITU are being responded to as well. So these are some of the thoughts that I had in mind when it comes to what we need to really look at in terms of the regulation, the regulatory landscape, and to be aware and broaden that scope and not isolate it purely to personal data protection. And for example, if you're looking at, there are certain functions that ICANN is looking to automate, or members in the ICANN community are going to automate. So if you are employing the use of AI, then if there are AI related regulations or compliance requirements, that you might want to be aware of that as well. So in terms of, we need to think a little bit also in terms of the future or emerging tech areas as well, and be aware of capturing those regulatory ideas that are coming up to handle those areas as well. I think I've covered most of it, but if there's anything you want to ask, please go ahead, Isha. Anybody else also. And the other thing is, I'm not an expert on the subject, so if there are areas that you have noticed and you want to flag in terms of regulatory development, so please feel free to raise your hand and add to this discussion, Samiran or anybody else on the call as well. Samiran has raised his hand. Samiran, please go ahead. Yeah.
Hi, Gangesh. So thank you, Isha and Gangesh, for flagging this, this conversation as such. So I just wanted to give you a sense of how we are doing this. I don't know if it's of any interest to anyone, but for example, just so you know, the last month, I have been actually tracking the development around the Sri Lanka personal data protection bill. Okay. So the question is, you might turn around and say, Sri Lanka is such a small country, 21 million people, hardly, 14 million online or 10 million online at this time, but why would you even bother? Post GDPR, we are very clear. What we've understood and the learning for ICANN.org has been that we need to just look at regulations, country regulations, from the perspective of how the DNS is working. And if there is an impediment to the working of the DNS, okay? And when you go there, the next step in that journey is that, okay, so how does it impact, whatever the new regulation is, how does that impact, let us say, contracted parties or, registries and registrars, okay? And even beyond that, you then go into the granularity of, all right, so if there's a violation of, let's say, of a PDP, statute in a certain country, what are the penalties and so on and so forth. So our focus has been very, very strong in that sense. So even when we, when Yoran Marvi wrote the mail to Honorable Minister Meenakshi Lekhi when she was heading the committee on the India PDP. We only focused on that aspect. And if you actually go into the ICANN correspondence and see that mail we sent, we were not commenting on, what's happening, but simply what impact there could be because of certain usage of terminology to running the DNS. So I just wanted to make this point because it's the same lens that we're applying when it comes to policies. One way or the other, we want to know what these national level policies, how rather these national level policies would impact the working of the DNS. So let me just stop here. I just thought I would share this to put things in a little more perspective because I'm quite deeply involved in this, apart from everything else I do. So yeah.
Thank you so much, Samiran, for sharing that insight. And it really spells out the process with which ICANN is approaching this, and it's very helpful. So I was just thinking about the discussion I think we had a couple of months ago, how sometimes a regulation is not clear about who it may apply to. So for example, when the intermediary guidelines came out in India, the scope of who can be an intermediary was also something that needed to. So I'm sure that you would also have to sit and go through it in more detail and then understand, okay, does it apply to ICANN or not? So do you want to share any perspective on those kind of challenges?
Sure. So what's interesting is, the IT rules that came out in February this year. So I started tracking that, and one of the most interesting. So and those who are following it in this in the room today, you would know that there are various litigations that are taking place at mostly at High Court of Delhi, whether it's Facebook, WhatsApp, Twitter, so on and so forth. But there's one litigation that's happening that's very, very interesting. There is a company called Bajaj Finance, which has brought a case against a contracted party for not, doing enough to protect intellectual property, and using the revised sort of IT rules to apply, and applying the revised IT rules in that litigation. I mean, some hearings have taken place and so on and so forth. So the point is, the way we are looking at the IT rules in India is, for now, we want to see, post these litigations, and if there is any judgment, or some of it could be inconclusive. But we want to see what comes out of it, what emerges out of it. Because yes, registrars are intermediaries, but the definition of intermediaries, will it get reshaped post the various litigations that are taking place? That remains to be seen. So yes, I remain on alert, tracking that as well.
Thank you very much, Samiran, for adding to that discussion. And if there are any questions, please feel free to ask or drop it in the chat box. And with that, I'll hand it over back to Isha. Isha, if you're speaking, you're on mute.
Sorry. Thank you. The perils of our times, I guess. No, I was just saying, I don't see any questions in the chat box. And thank you so much, Samiran, for just jumping in and clarifying a lot of things around, we were just having this discussion about intermediary guidelines and how, the focus, even in, I mean, this is personal, I could be wrong, but within the Indian stakeholder community, we've just been focused about like legitimate access to registrant data, EBDP. Those are some of the discussions that we've been having internally, but other regulations or proposed in shape, but you don't know what will happen to those, are something that we should keep an eye for, and I think is something that we should all start thinking about. So thank you, and thank you, Gangesh, for those great set of updates. If anybody else has any question and you want to ask, please raise your hand or post them in the chat box.
Yeah, Satish, please go ahead, Satish.
Yeah, I have a question. This is not my area of expertise. See, each time we have discussions with the rest of the world, one of the things that comes up vis-a-vis India is the number of internet shutdowns that we have. Now, we know that it's a sensitive issue, but we need to be able to engage with this issue. We cannot kind of run away from it. Now, one of the ways to perhaps address this is because whenever there's a debate, it becomes an issue of national interest. And then we are kind of rendered helpless because we don't know what to kind of counter that argument with. I would imagine that the argument against, or rather to kind of counterbalance national interest would be the public interest, the global public interest or the national public interest. Now, the problem is that we don't have any quantification of this public interest. How much do people lose? Last week, Nigeria banned Twitter because of a personal problem with the president's tweet being kind of banned. So in response to that ban of or deletion of the president's tweet, the president turned around and banned Twitter itself. Now, what's happening there is now a very active debate on the economic impact of this. Now, we cannot easily put a number on what happened. In fact, Twitter is not even very popular in Nigeria, but still, people are talking about the economic impact, that there is an economic impact, and arising out of that, more ripples. For example, foreign investment coming into Nigeria will be kind of blocked. Now, in India, although we have a lot of capability to study these things, we don't have something to kind of back our argument, saying that there's a public interest issue here, there's a public interest loss. What are we losing actually? Each time there's a shutdown, what do we actually lose? Not just in terms of actual people not able to do transactions, but also a reputational loss. So it will be interesting from a longer term perspective if somebody could do some work on a robust response from civil society towards, or civil society plus research and academic communities, towards this whole issue of how to kind of balance this kind of issues. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for flagging that, Satish. In fact, I think Samiran also had his hand up, or was that on your hand?
No, so Gangesh, I just wanted to add here that ICRIER some years ago had done a study.
I just pasted the link. Yeah.
Yes, great. So to Satish's point, of course, the study is a little dated now, but ICRIER had done a study on the cost of, if I would say, the cost of a shutdown. But how do you deal with what happens next is, of course, up for further debate and deliberation. So I just want to make that point.
Right. Thanks, Samiran, for bringing that up. In fact, we were just pulling out that report when Satish brought out the economic aspect, and it's something that we want to, return to and update. It's just that we haven't had, bandwidth in terms of the project space. But it's a topic that is extremely important and is something that a lot of stakeholders have been talking about for a while. But I just want to quickly bring, I know we're well ahead of time, but since we have the interesting conversation, I thought I'd just quickly bring the challenge of working on this topic, like rightly Satish brought it, that it's a bunch of diverging perspectives. So if you bring in a legitimate argument, there's always another, a national interest argument or something, a point to settle all debates sort of an attitude. But I think what Satish highlighted and is important is also to continue to have that discussion with various stakeholders to really understand the diverging perspectives and to find that middle ground in terms of causing minimal damage and achieving the objectives achieving the objectives through other more, less restrictive means. So thank you, Satish. Thank you, Samiran, for sharing and discussing. I'd want to thank everybody who's on this call. Some of them had to leave for other meetings and sharing these questions. And I just want to flag that if anybody wants to discuss any of these issues, I understand in the limited time that we have, we may not have covered all issues of interest. Please feel free to write an email or drop a message to either of us, Isha or me, and we'd be happy to schedule specific discussions on those topics or add them to the agenda on the next meeting. So thank you all once again for your time, patience, and participation. Please take care and stay safe, and hope to see you all at the ICANN meeting. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.